Welcome to the Future of Jobs and Careers, where we take a look at the jobs and careers of the future and the career tactics that you can use today to help set yourself up for tomorrow.
Well, good morning, Alec. It's nice to be here, and it's always good to collaborate with you on an ever-changing subject with everything in technology moving so fast and the way we go about finding our jobs and elevating our careers.
I'm Alec Kaufman. I'm the founder of Annovation. I do tech and strategy for small businesses. And I really think that there are three core skills that you need to really ace the next decade, which is entrepreneurship, your ability to spot opportunities, innovation, your ability to have an improvement process, and your tech understanding, ability to understand the tools at your disposal and leverage them to get what you need to get done. And then I'll hand it over to Scott.
Thank you, Alec. My name is Scott Jacobs. I am the founder of Jacobs Strategic Group, and we focus primarily as an overall company on small businesses, and we have a career coaching vertical as well. And they do touch each other for sure, because the entrepreneurship and the small businesses that are out there, the majority of businesses in the United States are entrepreneurs who have started up their own companies, and we love to see them foster and grow. One of the things that we do see, though, as they grow, the blend of talent and the talent requirements and skills that they need to continue that growth is critical. And as Alex said a few seconds ago, if you can't stay up on the technology while still running your business, sometimes that's a challenge. But the other piece too is, how do you keep up with the competition? And that's one of the things that Alec and I are going to talk about a little further. And when I say talk competition, I talk about the competition you have for like goods and services, as well as the competition you might have in being a job seeker and seeking a leadership position in an organization. If you don't know the tools that are available to you or what the company is using, you can fall behind.
And I mean, business is competitive. Like we don't allow monopolies. We mandate competition. So basically, you're going to have competition, and in competition, the tools that you use to compete heavily influence your ability to outcompete others. So I think that's kind of the key thing. There's competition in the job market, there's competition between business to business. So understanding the technology out there is really understanding the tools that are at your disposal, so you're not creating a asymmetry where you're basically being able to be outcompeted by someone who has way better tools than you.
Well, that's a great kind of tag into what I wanted to ask you, Alec. You know, as a young entrepreneur and on the tech side of the world, what are you seeing some of the most critical tools or on coming up technology that's important for us to not only be aware of, but to be able to use?
Well, definitely AI right now. I think that's the big one. I'm actually going to, in this, I'll go into future-proofing your career, which is going to have those skills. So I'll have a way better answer for you a little bit later in the presentation. All right, so the agenda for today, it's really, we spend one part future-proofing your career and then one part career tactics. And so we'll kind of split those two things. And then this is really part of the Annovation Community. If you haven't heard of the Annovation Community, the Annovation Community is basically a group of people getting together, trying to understand what this crazy tech-fueled future looks like, trying to understand all the different technologies, all the different pieces, how these technologies play together, so that you can make good decisions about the future. And I'm one person trying to wrap my head around this, and the Annovation Community actually started because I was just trying to figure out, how do I organize all my thoughts on this? And then I figured, you know, it would be better than me just organizing all my thoughts, me organizing all my thoughts and then discussing it with people. And then they post their thoughts and then we discuss it together. So we do this thing called the Friday Future Talk as well, where every Friday we get on and we talk through different technology topics. And it's all about understanding technology today and using that to help you get to where you want to go in the future. So, last month, we talked about the 3 career tactics of your personal elevator pitch. So, this is getting really clear about what you want to do, retraining, this is how to make a career pivot, and freelancing as a career move. And those are on our YouTube channel. And so if you want to watch last month's meeting, it's on YouTube. And if you do watch it on YouTube, like and subscribe. I get to say that now because I have stuff on YouTube.
I'd like to comment on last month's meeting, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
After we had the meeting, the topics and the subject overall continued to be present with my interactions and meetings I had, and even with some of my clients. And it was very interesting to see how we continue to develop and leverage some of the things that you were talking about. And one of the key points was, one of the topics we talked about was leveraging your network. And as I'm working with people on career coaching and their job search, it is more about the quality, not the quantity of your contacts, and the reality that your contacts are so important. And that network is your net worth when you're really looking for a job today, because there's so many people applying for jobs just via the channels of automated entry of resumes and cover letters. And to circumvent that, or to get your resume to the top, is done successfully through effective networking. And so we talked about that quite a bit. And then we talked about, I had a couple of clients, particularly on the marketing side of business, who found that if they could work in a way that they could freelance into a company that maybe couldn't afford a full-time person yet, they were finding it was almost like a test. It was a proving ground. It was an opportunity for them to check it out and for the company to check them out before extending a true offer. Almost a probation in a sense, but it was an opportunity for them to also be fragmented in the sense that they could work for multiple companies part-time if desired.
Yeah, it's definitely a tactic. And I mean, like, it's one of those tactics that, as we look more into some of these topics too, of like job searching in times of uncertainty, those tactics that we discussed last month are going to be huge for kind of job searching in uncertain times, leveraging your network. I mean, you kind of already talked about leveraging your network right there, but we're going to get more into that. And then the marketing yourself aspect, I think, is really interesting. Your personal elevator pitch applies very cleanly into marketing yourself. So we'll touch on that later too. And then send us your topic suggestions because we pull these from basically just a list that we have. So if you have topics that you want us to touch on, send those our way and then we'll add them to the list and try to work them in. So on to future proofing your career. So last month we talked about the 2040 jobs list. And that was a list that I had made just for a completely different presentation, and I hadn't really spent much time on it. So I took a little bit more time on that, and then I also got some questions of why 2040. So I want to get into why 2040, explain that whole idea, and then some job scenarios as well. And really, this is all about thinking about what your job is in 2040, what job you want to have, where you want to be, and then making the directionally correct actions that you can take today to make sure that you're most likely to get to that point.
Someday, Alec, I want to take this a step further because I enjoyed our conversation last month surrounding this, that I want to take it a step further and future-proofing your life in 2040, because we talk so much about robotics, AI, and the overall ability to animate and automate so much of our lives, and that pertains to our jobs. So it was very interesting to hear your take on what kind of jobs would be there, right? And what kind of jobs may have evolved into something else. And we've seen this through history. We've seen this through history, whether it be, hey, we're sitting here on a computer right now, right? And what things were like before a computer. We had the telephone, and now we're able to stream our faces and voices and changes a lot of things. So, with that said, I think the technology side of it really emphasizes the exceptional growth that we're having as we move towards 2040.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of people look at this from like the career and the jobs lens and the business lens. But really, when you're looking at all these different elements of technology, they're both important for your personal productivity as well as your work productivity. So, the way that you organize your life, the things that you're trying to get done day to day, those those things all get productivity gains as well. So, thinking about how that works with your tech skills, how that applies to both your personal life and your professional life, and actually being able to leverage that. Remember when we were going through some of your ways that you organize things on your laptop and things on your phone, and how like keeping those organized helps you not just personally, not just professionally, it also helps you personally.
Absolutely.
Same thing applies when you're using AI. Same thing applies when robotics get there. Robotics is going to be weirder. I mean, you might have a robot walking your dog or something like that, but it'll be interesting.
Well, I think, all of those things of automation is going to take, us all by storm, whether it be a self-driving automobile or a drone that delivers your packages. All those things are going to impact all of us.
And then just a note. So Emily or any guest or anyone, feel free to just chime in whenever. We're just kind of going to keep running on autopilot otherwise. But if you have questions or things you want to add to the discussion, just feel free to shout them out.
Well, I am interested in a different perspective. I'm interested in Emily's thoughts on when you start to think about the future, what type of jobs do you see that are going to be part of that future? And how do you think people are going to prepare and get in front of that curve? Any thoughts?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it's one that like really when I look at it, I think in some ways it's an advantage. So my primary background, digital marketing, especially really honing in on the strategic brand marketing, social media strategy side. And I think in some ways it's an advantage because social media is always changing. It's not like email or web where there's some changes, but the platform's essentially the same. You have to be adapting to social media's algorithms and changes. So in some ways, I'm like, okay, social media is it's just a platform and it's the way it's changed. So I've always kind of since my career began had to pivot with it. And so in some ways I'm like, yeah, of course everything's going to change. But I think really regardless of your career, whether it's one that does change really often or it's more stable, like email marketing, or something even more stable than that, an economics professor or something like that. Um, I think really the way that technology is changing so quickly in a way that is really deeply affecting how we work and how we live personally, it's going to come down to learning to be adaptable and flexible to those changes and find ways to embrace them to make how you work better, how you live better. And I think in addition, learning and investing in the soft skills too, I think is going to be really important because everyone embraces technology differently. Everyone works differently and lives differently. And just being the best at the newest tools isn't going to be something that guarantees that you're going to succeed or integrate or grow as a leader or be someone listens to or wants to work with. And so I think as well, I think when I started out my career personally, I kind of saw brand marketing as a bit more fluffy and less stable or secure maybe than something more like data driven. And really I'm kind of I've come full circle to now feeling like, well, brand really, I mean, you use data to inform your strategies. Brand is in some ways invaluable and I think more timeless. I'm biased, of course, but it includes those more soft skills of like, what are those core values and ways that people relate to your brand and who is your brand, what is your brand. And Yeah, I see that really. I think that ability to be adaptable, invest in those soft skills, and really kind of I saw something recently where they were talking about how some younger generations or just as a society we're embracing your gut feeling more, which is something that we weren't talking about as much in the mainstream a decade ago. And I think that is part of that. Like we are really learning. I can't just look at the bullet points and call it a day. I have to also really be able to think about how I feel about this as a human. So I think it'll really come down to both of those and applying those personally and professionally. As far as yeah, I think we'll probably get deeper into that.
I'm a true believer in the importance of human engagement,
Yeah,
and whether it be your communication around a brand and its value proposition, what its true meaning is. Um, and you're right, 10, 20 years ago, soft skills were not recognized as important as they are today. And I think the motivation of today's recent graduates would say soft skills, particularly from a leadership perspective, those that are guiding them and developing them, are critical for them to commit to an organization. It's a different culture that is being valued. But the other side of it is how do you blend technical aptitude with the soft skills? And stereotypically, we joke a little bit about it, but people in the engineering field, people in the accounting field, we sometimes stereotype them as being dry and maybe unpersonable because their head is just always thinking of technology. But to be the most successful leader in that space and still embrace the competence that they have, you need to have an overarching sense of soft skills. And I think from my perspective, probably the biggest soft skill today is a concept of empathetic listening. And empathetic listening can't be automated. It can't be, to my knowledge, yet robotic. It's the human side of things that have to be interwoven in our technical advancements.
absolutely. I think I totally agree. And I think to that point, a recent example that I experienced, or I think it's just a good little mini case study for that is you can ChatGPT can say nice things to you and it can say things that make you feel good. But when you talk to it enough, you realize it kind of says the same thing over and over again. And it like refines it to what your prompt is. But after like 10 times where it tells you, that's such a great question. You're really great at that. You know, it's a robot. Like it's mimicking things. It's not truly a lot. It's not truly, it's not real. It is real in the sense of whatever advice it's giving you or whatever information it's compiled and delivered to you, and that's really valuable. But I think that is true. I mean, if you've ever had a leader who can maybe they have the talking points where they sound like they're listening, but you realize by like the fourth meeting, it's just kind of an act. Exactly. And I think that is where it might work at the very beginning when you think, wow, this is going to replace therapists because AI is it listens to me and makes me feel good. That doesn't last. And I totally agree. At least to the point we're at right now, nothing's going to replace that emotional intelligence and ability to empathetically listen.
Well, one of the concerns I have in regards to AI generated relationships, as you state, it takes it beyond what I would have considered uh, the social media and how social media and social relationships through that can be very deceptive. And if you believe through ChatGPT you've developed some kind of relationship with this thing in the cloud, um, mental health issues can bubble to the top. But I don't want to focus on that today. I want to focus more on how do we see innovation with the recognition of soft skills. How do we see that coming together? And you talk about the Annovation Community. And I believe it is a combination of those things. One thing a couple of years ago, Alec, I'm going to mention this, and I'd like for you to take the thought further, is some people that are technically minded, if you have a creative behind a technically minded person, you have an asset. Okay. If I have a technical person who can't creatively problem solve or can't think outside of the box, they're driving everything by the numbers, right? They might be good for certain functions in my business, but the person that I can take to the next level is one that has some of those soft skills, but also the creative thinker. And one of the things I was going to ask Alec to explain is we talked about he had brainstorms, and you have a notebook that has all your business ideas, right? Probably
Hmm.
for the last 10 years on this thing
Yep.
and through college. And one of them that I found very fascinating was the coffee shop and bar. And
Yeah.
maybe you can share a little bit about that, because that in my mind, bars and coffee shops are gathering places. They're gathering places where people socialize. It's all gathering places where people might nerd out and just read or sit on their computer. But you had a concept that there was something not quite similar, but there's a place called Kramer's in Washington, D.C. that has some similar elements to it. And for some reason, it draws young adults. Share a little more about your concept, because it is what could be the future.
Well, yeah, so I think coffee shop and bar, it's actually not super novel on its own, just because there, like if you go down the street on Lombard here, there's a coffee shop and bar. It does both of those things. What gets really interesting is what you put around it for the brand of the coffee shop and the bar.
Yes.
What other elements are wrapped up around that that kind of give it that gathering space, but also a reason why you're gathering as well. So the concept is actually, and maybe I actually eventually do something about this with the Annovation Community, because the concept was to get a bunch of people thinking about the future and discussing future ideas together in a physical space. Now, I do actually have that with a digital space, and maybe in the future I actually make that into a physical space where people can gather and have those same dialogues, which would be really cool.
Well, and maybe the brick and mortar has, you do events, it's pop-up events.
Yeah.
Right now on downtown, actually uptown on Burnside, is a bar that is a place for gaming. And I don't mean electronic gaming, I mean board games. And like-minded people gather and they socialize, they enjoy themselves, and they play board games, right? And I think that we've taken it to the next level too, where people gather and play. I know a couple places down by Lewis and Clark College where they play trivia, right? So around universities, you have hopefully intelligent young people who can have a lot of fun with the recall of trivia, right? And, I don't want to stereotype and call it nerding out, but in the reality of it all, technology for many is their comfort zone, right? And we want people to be comfortable. And whether it be a brand, like we talked about a few minutes ago, a brand that makes you feel safe, right? Or a technology that serves a need, it would be great to have like-minded people who could sit down and share ideas. And one of the things that I find interesting is, what if we could find a utopic spot to do it without judgment, without someone laughing at you? I mean, inside, Alec, of course, some of your ideas were a little out there, but I never laughed at them.
But that's the point. I think a lot of people get scared of the bad idea or the idea that's like, oh, this idea is so stupid. But the thing is, the whole point is to get your ideas that you have written down so that you actually remember them and you can go revisit them. And one of the big challenges for people when they're brainstorming actually is that they don't write down all their bad ideas. And it's kind of this popcorn ideation model where you kind of have these different ideas and you're just writing them down, writing them down, writing them down, and then write down your bad ideas as well, and then look at them, and then those might kind of create little branches that you then follow and say, oh yeah, actually, if I do this, this, and this to this idea, this idea becomes great. So, you know, thinking about how you can actually take your idea and move it beyond the bad idea and writing down all your ideas is that really one of the critical pieces there. I have so many bad ideas that I've written down, but because I have bad ideas, I can look at them and I can make them into good ideas.
Not everybody can do that, but it
But
is an
everyone can write
exercise
down their
of,
bad ideas.
I agree. And I think it's an exercise of free open-mindedness, free thinking, being open to, I think a lot of it has to do with confidence. If you're in a shell and you don't have that confidence and you have doubt in your mind, you're not going to write down what you might think is not great. But if you're confident and, almost like, I don't care what you think about this, it's okay, because I'm confident that maybe some of the stuff will stick. So when we go, let's go back to our future proofing. And I think that one of the things that has come up, whether it be branding, whether it be data collection and assessing, relevant results, or it be free thinking, I think creativity is something that maybe we downplay. And we look at creativity as, from my perspective, I have looked at creativity many times as being fluffy, not being something taken seriously. And over my life, I've done a complete about face with that concept because sometimes those free thinking individuals come up with the best ideas.
Yep.
Scott, you're going to be amazed because it's like you read into the presentation further, because I added this morning, and you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, wow, that's I like
I
read
can
it.
only imagine, Alec, that you and I are on the same page sometimes.
Yep, you haven't seen anything of the next slides, but
I'm
you're
ready,
you're going to be
buddy.
amazed how relevant these next slides are to exactly what you were just talking about. So I want to talk about the phases to get to 2040. And so really we have a couple different phases here. First, you have phase one, which is your 2025 to 2030. This is kind of the era of AI productivity. So this is where workers see that productivity boost. Employers maybe hire a little bit less due to the increased employee productivity, and or employees actually work less hours. And there's a couple pieces here where the AI tools are actually automating repetitive tasks, and then there's these AI assisted management. And then on top of that, you've got you doing tasks, but you're doing less tasks. So rather than doing just a bunch of repetitive tasks, those are starting to get automated away. And then you're starting to see more of people working on problems and opportunities. When we're imagining our job, it consists of mainly tasks, problems, and opportunities. Tasks are often repeat things, so repeat things that have to be done. Problems are basically issues that come up. Maybe the bot's not working, or maybe you have this fire, and everybody in business is firefighting, right? People are still going to be firefighting it deep into the future as well. But those tasks are probably going to get automated away. And then there's opportunities as well. So different things for growth strategies, maybe new creative questions. If you're thinking, what if we did this way? And it's like this creative idea that you might actually go after, that's an opportunity that you can then chase. So spending a little bit more time on problems and opportunities, spending less time on repetitive tasks is the trend here. And that's 2025 through 2030, the era that we're in now.
I'd like to say something because I look at it that if I can remove by leveraging technology and AI, like you said, tasks, right? Or tactical repetitive work and open up more time for me to work on strategic work, right? It's just like somebody that doesn't have any time other than to operate their business and they can't think or look ahead because they don't have the time to think strategically, right? But I think the other thing is you're removing some of these barriers by leveraging technology. But the other thing that I see is a mindset. And the mindset that has to coincide with this is something that you have listed here, but maybe didn't emphasize, is let's look at problems as opportunities, right? We hear this all the time. But if you have an opportunistic mindset, as you talk, you've had conversations with people that are just negative about everything, right? And then you've had conversations with people that are very positive and see the good in what's going on, right? I mean, it's just like the naysayers, the people that say, "Oh my gosh, robots are going to take away all of our jobs and we're all going to be unemployed." I don't see it that way. And people can debate me on it, but the robotic vacuums at a facility that I go to with frequency, the robotic vacuums at night free up the people that used to operate the vacuums to do other meaningful things within that same building. They did not lose their job. If anything, they elevated their technical expertise because now they know how to run robots. All right. And as you know, Portland has ice storms, right? We have problems. We have snow every now and then, but then it becomes dangerous. And I was on a task force to try to solve a problem of ice when it melts, slipping off a roof and becoming a tremendous hazard. Okay. And the natural thing was to leverage the technical mindset that we have today. So should I run copper wires on the roof so we can melt the ice before it gets too thick, right? Should we increase the size of the gutters so we can capture it, right? Or we had somebody, and it was nobody on my task force, no one my age, said, what if we had a drone that had de-icer and we do what they do on airplane runways and on airplanes, and we take the drone technology and have someone using the joystick like your video games, and we actually spray de-icer on the roof of this building so it doesn't accumulate. So you're taking a problem and creating an opportunity that leverages technology, right? And sure, we had to hire a licensed drone operator. We had to take out a little insurance on the drone that it wouldn't go haywire and crash into some car. And they had to invest in the technology of 2 drones to mitigate the risk of someone being seriously hurt. So that was a good example of how a problem was solved outside of the box, outside of the traditional way that I was never going to think of on my own, right? It was, to be honest, it was a young techie, someone in their 20s who said, why not do this? I don't know if it's possible, but what if?
I love that.
I would add, I'll add one thing to that, which is what are the 2 skills that you need to have to be able to recognize those things? And those are the 2 most important skills, which I think we need to have more training for, which are innovation and entrepreneurship. Your entrepreneurial mindset is what's going to help you recognize that opportunity, and your ability to innovate, which is a skill, meaning there's a lot of other pieces of it. Like it's a bundle of skills, but there's all these different skills that ladder up to someone being innovative, and there's all these different skills that ladder up to someone being entrepreneurial. And if you have those bundles of skills, you're going to be very effective at identifying and solving problems, identifying problems, and identifying opportunities for growth as well, and acting on them.
I can't agree with you more. And in this particular case, persuasive communication. You took somebody who had a fantastic idea, but from an authority perspective, they were one of the lowest people in the room in regards to experience, title, whatever. And they had the wisdom and the confidence to help solve a problem and to contradict the other solutions that were on the table already, right? And to take it to the next level, now that roof does not have copper wires running all over it to melt ice. We actually mitigated the amount of ice by putting a de-icer on it before it could be ice.
And how many days would you have actually had ice on there that you needed to run the copper wire? Because the copper wire would have been there year round.
Permanently. Exactly. And in the creative element of, okay, because the naysayers were like, well, yeah, but where's the thing going to take off and land? Guess what? No one's using the outdoor tennis court when there's an ice storm. So we have a landing pad on an outdoor tennis court now that is safe. It's even fenced in the winter, and it can be a drone pad, right? And so they're solving all these problems and recognizing them. And innovation took it to the next level. That drone investment also became a marketing tool because they took some aerial shots and videos of this building, the operations, the people that they never would have done, and they sure wouldn't have paid an outsourced agency this much money. And they were able to do it by just attaching some new technology to that. And so now you have a multi-use asset.
I think that too, this whole story is a great example of two things, which is the importance of having that diversity in that group of people when you're problem solving. So that you do have
Yes.
those different, if it was all young people, they would have maybe missed some of the, like, there's context and other things that you think you just came up with this great idea. Well, guess what? Like, been there, done that. The first thing everyone always thinks of. And so I think it is a great example, but then also that culture where I think, yes, that the person's ability to communicate persuasively is important, but they're being in a space, creating a workspace that is conducive to being able to share ideas and be innovative and be entrepreneurial, making it so it's not a high risk, or it's not it's not a bad thing to speak up and share those ideas, and encouraging that really. I know I myself personally, I've worked in job places that encouraged that and were really rewarding. I worked in places that I would say that they were and really weren't, and the ability to grow professionally, especially as a young professional. When I started out, one of my first places I worked was super share the idea. Everyone's on the same level. Share your ideas. If you have a good idea, let's run with it. My personal career growth was so much higher and faster at that place. And I think that is, in this phase of AI productivity, the businesses that can really embrace and see the opportunity to use tools to enhance what their workers are doing and embrace some of those other skills are going to be outpacing. And the employees that can do that as well are going to be getting that growth as well and just really outperform the others.
And there's a really big point there that a lot of businesses are missing, especially businesses who don't understand. Often this happens by accident, but what'll happen is someone comes up with an idea or some type of thing where they're like, I think this could be better if we did this. And they pitch that. And then they pitch that to the leadership team and they shoot it down. It might be an offhanded shoot down. It might just be kind of like I don't think that'll work, or a no, or however they shoot that down. But the problem is you have to be very careful how you shoot down ideas if you're going to say that won't work, because you need that person to be looking for these different times where they could improve something and actively pitching you their ideas. Because if you don't do that, you start shrinking the like brains involved in your business from a business of like brains of the number of employees to businesses more toward the brains of just a couple of people on the leadership team. So using all of the actual innovative power of your employee base is important, rather than actually stifling those ideas and making it so that you don't get those ideas anymore. And it's just your ideas are the only ones that are actually being put out there. You create this echo chamber, and it causes a risk to your business. And it happens time and time again in all kinds of different businesses.
That's a good point. And this a young professional that came up with the idea, what do you think their level of confidence was after that? How did they feel about themselves? They felt not only did I contribute, they implemented my idea. So, Alec, I think one of the things, you have that list going of future jobs. So let's add to that certified drone operator.
Well, I don't know. In 2040, drone it might be drone programming,
There
but
we go. But
because I think you've set the
at this
path.
point, the insurance companies require a certified drone operator for liability purposes, particularly if you're flying and doing some shots in a stadium for a concert or filled with athletes and fans. Your drone has to stay controlled, right?
All right. So the next piece of this is understanding this report from the World Economic Forum. So when I say these things about how there's probably not going to be a lot of job loss in this 2025 to 2030 period, I'm not just saying that. This is the Future of Jobs report by the World Economic Forum, and they're actually predicting that there will be more jobs created than jobs destroyed. So all the people who are saying like, "Oh man, everyone's going to lose their jobs to AI," that's not what it looks like in terms of the data. And it's not what it looks like in terms of the tech either. I think this is the era of AI productivity where you see massive productivity gains, but you don't see the job loss. Job loss potential could come later, and I'll talk about that. But this period, 2025 to 2030, AI productivity. And so that's the skill to focus on. That's the thing, that's the skill to build, is understanding how you can use that to your advantage. And then the other piece here is the share of tasks and how they're being done. There's tasks done by people, tasks done in a combination, and tasks done by technology. You can see that that shifts from now to 2030, where the tasks done by technology was 22%. Now it's projected to be 34%. Then you've got combination tasks, 33% or 30% jumps to 33%. And that share of people doing tasks at 47% drops down to 33%. And that's just people doing that. That's not combination of people and technology. That's just people tasks. So I think that's the important trend to wrap your head around, is that these tasks are changing and it's going to be more technology involved in the tasks. And then this is the one where I was saying, Scott, you read ahead, not really, but you saw into the what I was going to talk about, which is the top 6 skills according to the World Economic Forum actually are AI and big data, networks and cybersecurity, technological literacy, creative thinking, resilience, flexibility and agility, curiosity, and lifelong learning. So those 6 skills are just right right in line with what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And I think one is we talked about last month that's on there is lifelong learning as well. So I think it's just fantastic.
I mean, if you're looking for the skills that you should be prioritizing to set yourself up, these are the ones. Especially when I talk about tech literacy, your understanding of technology, that's a big one. When I talk about AI and big data, that's a big one. Try to wrap your head around these things as best you can. There's a ton of tools out there to do it. And if you want a community there to discuss it, Annovation Community is there for you. And Annovation, like the business, is also there too. That's what I do, tech and strategy.
Something that just keeps coming to mind to me, or has recently, in thinking about this kind of shift of tasks. I love that chart showing the tasks that'll move from just people to technology. Is I heard something a couple of months ago about how a huge number of management roles really didn't exist. Like however many years, I think it was something in like the 70s, there was really the beginning of a boom of management type roles as technology changed and like the skills that workers are doing in workplaces change. And I feel like now we're kind of seeing, and at that time, like tech skills were also important. And as things changed, as email came around in the 90s, that really shifted what kind of skills a manager needed and how much if you got the number of memos on your desk in a day, I assume that we now get in emails. In the 70s, it probably would have disrupted some workflow and needed some changes in that. Then we've gotten into like, you get 300 emails a day, and that's part of you spend half your time doing emails. I feel like now we're kind of seeing that pendulum swing to where technology's gotten to a point where, okay, management roles are shifting again, and the execution roles are shifting again, and the way that technology is adding and removing work from our scope is also going to change. And so it's really, I mean, taking a step back, things are changing, but they're always changing. And the way things are now versus 2050, I mean, the pace is going to just keep getting faster and faster. But it also is kind of, it's part of a bigger trend, and it's just the waves of how work is, especially with technology as part of it.
Well, and one of the things that's really interesting too, to add on to that point, do you know middle management wasn't really a thing until like we had the titans of industry like Rockefeller and those types of businesses? So, and that's like early 1900s. So that just wasn't a thing. And then we actually started to create middle management because we had companies that were big enough to warrant it. And then going beyond that, then you start to get into this internet age where the internet starts to come along, computers start to come along. That really changes the game. And I think a lot of people imagine that this AI is just automating so many jobs away, but we've already had all these different softwares come in and change the way that we do work today. Like if you look at something like Asana, or if you look at some of these other different productivity platforms that are just helping us do better management, and actually they're taking a lot of those tasks and automating them away already. So we've already had this big software push that is automating a significant number of tasks. Now, the thing that I think is interesting is we went through that whole change, but we didn't freak out about it because we just didn't have a nice word to latch onto it with. And we didn't really even identify it that much. Now we've got this fancy word of AI, but like really some of it's just going to be software taking your job, like not taking your job. I have to be careful here. Not taking your job, taking your tasks. And that's kind of the reframe, is these things are going to take your tasks. They're not necessarily going to take your job. They will take your job if your job does not consist of anything more than tasks. So
Absolutely.
I think it's important to think about what does your job encompass other than just the repetitive tasks.
Absolutely. And I think it'll also take it if you can't embrace it in a way where if you're still spending 80% of your workday, 50% of your workday checking emails when everyone else has figured out how to automate that and streamline it and be able to focus on those opportunities and problems, then okay, you're also at risk. And that's where it really is, having that agile mindset, I think, is really important.
Well, and staying on the forefront, like you're pretty safe if you stay on the forefront of the technology. So if you keep up with the technology, you're pretty safe. And then where it gets risky is when you actually end up getting behind. So the risky point is actually, I think of COVID as a good example of this. It was kind of this filter moment where any company that was not digitized enough then had to figure out very rapidly how to digitize.
Mm-hmm.
But you could have been fully remote before, or you could have had the ability to be fully remote before. But that that change then just forced being able to be remote. It was like a filter moment. And I wonder if how many of these things are going to have a similar pattern where if you're up to date with the technology, you're going to be okay. But then there's kind of these filter moments that kind of make it a little bit harder if you're not up to date with the technology. Another version of that would be it would be fine if you didn't have a website back in 1990. But if you don't have a website now, it's like why don't you have a website? There's an expectation of keeping up with technology as well. that ends up happening over time. And so the consumers demand a level of technology in a business. I think that's the same type of thing that ends up happening on the employer side. The employers expect a certain level of technological competency as well. So if you stay up to date in your business or as an employee on technology, I think it's going to be a big benefit to you.
Absolutely. And I would say if your business isn't, as an employee, if your business isn't keeping up to date, taking the time outside of your workplace, like if there's just structures in place, they don't want to embrace it. I think it is a really valuable skill to invest time on your own and keep those skills up to date because it is a more insecure job market. People leave work faster and are gaining these skills really rapidly, and you don't want to get in a position where you find yourself suddenly without the skills that other folks have gained in other workplaces and trying to compete with them.
I do want to comment, though. I don't want anyone that might be online or listening to this later to think that you need to absolutely be at the forefront of emerging technology. I've been in different industries where they're technology laggards, and sometimes it's for many good reasons. And some of it could be, I don't want to mess with it until the kinks are all worked out, or I'm concerned about cybersecurity in this particular area. In my career, particularly with operations, specifically financial institutions, so the fintech world and healthcare were both technology laggards. It had to be proven outside of their test that it was safe, secure, and effective. So I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that it's not just the most technologically savvy people that are going to be the success of the future. There's a number of different people that come in or insert themselves at different times, but you got to keep up on it. You can't lose the competence of what's going on around you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there's a really important distinction, which I didn't clearly make, which is there's a difference between when you adopt it into your business or when you adopt it into everything and when you learn about it. I think you should be learning about these things as much as you can, as soon as you can, so that you're aware of them and you know how to make good decisions around them. But when you adopt it, totally up to you. You can adopt it later, but the important thing is that you learn about it so that you can actually make an informed decision. Because it's really hard to know when to use a hammer if you don't know how to use a hammer.
That's a good point.
So that gets us into phase 2, which is this 2030 to 2035 phase. And this is where I think you'll see a lot more robotic productivity. We're already starting to see it sprinkled around, but I think it's going to get really prevalent 2030 to 2035. And this is the point where I think we'll see a lot of jobs that are actually automated because the manual tasks are automated. Now, that doesn't mean that the full job goes away. That just means that the manual tasks of the job are probably gone. And so figuring out what are the other elements of that job that this person can do, or what are the pivots of that job? What are the different pieces of it? If you get displaced by autonomous vehicles, can you be some type of fleet champion where you're managing a fleet of autonomous vehicles, something like that? There's iterations of jobs, and I think that's when you get to these robotic automations, it gets a little bit harder because the task of the manual labor constitutes so much of the job that just takes up much of what the job is. So this is where I think a lot more people will think career pivots, things like that, and actually changing what their job is called. And so when you look out to this 2030 to 2035 timeframe, you've got autonomous vehicles, you've got autonomous delivery. There's a company called Zipline. Definitely recommend looking them up. You've got autonomous factories and autonomous assistants. So think your humanoid robots that are running around doing other random manual labor. Now, the full system that seems to be getting worked toward is kind of this automated supply chain system where it's the automated vehicles with the autonomous or the autonomous vehicles with autonomous delivery, with autonomous factories. So you have the full manufacturing supply chain and logistics end all taken care of by robots. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be humans in the loop here. There's going to be humans in the loop, but this system might end up being very heavily automated. So if you are like the person who is doing the repetitive manual task, that is the place that I would be cautious of uh, staying in that 2030 to 2035 range when I think it might get automated. And then the 2035 to 2040 phase. This is where we get into the weird stuff because this is where, depending on how things shape out, we might not actually need full employment to meet the demands of the population, meaning we don't have to actually have that amount of employment. But people still want to do things. So people are still going to do things that create value for others. We're just probably not going to need that level of employment to necessarily just get all the things that need to get done. So this is where you move away from things that are essential jobs to more things that are kind of, I don't want to say recreational, but things that kind of build up humans in general that aren't the basic necessities that we need to live. And so I think that, like, you look at influencers today. Influencers were not a thing before. Well, they were in a way, but not the same way that they are today. But that's changed a lot, where that's a whole new category of where anyone could make money talking on any subject that they're interested in. So that's a that's not an essential job, but a very it's a very different job that was created out of social media. And I think we could see a lot more of these things exist. Um, and that's kind of the core thesis of the 2040 jobs list is what are those new value additive things where, say, we have this bulk of other jobs taken up. What are the new value creation things that people can still do and leverage? For example, there's someone who sells air on social media. They sell jars of air. It's like, it's a joke product. But the thing is, that person could probably actually make a living on that at some point. So, maybe they're not the most essential jobs, but there's still things that we do that add value to the world in some way. And how this ties into the whole weird economic restructuring thing, though, is that there are these ideas out there in the world of UBI and UBN, universal basic income and universal basic needs. A lot of people talk about them like they're coming in like 2030 or they're coming in 2035, but I think that's probably further out. It's in this 2035 to 2040 range if we do anything about that at all. So I think don't count on something like that. Try to think about the ways that you can actually set yourself up in your career to operate without that. And then if it comes down to we have a UBI or a UBN system where it's like an income distribution or everybody gets a home or something like that, that's great. You can use that to your advantage. But don't don't count on that and expect that to be a thing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, because uh, this gets into much bigger questions and pictures, and on the topic of UBI, and I think we're seeing some of this now. I think as workers feel that fear and pressure on their employment and ability to provide for themselves, we're seeing more political engagement and people putting pressure, asking those questions of why is the work I've done not serving me, or how can I have it serve me personally better? And I see, yeah, I think you can do a lot with your career, but there does need to be these bigger picture restructuring. It should be, we're going to have the resources, arguably we already do, to have these structures that do provide for everyone. Being able to come together as a community and advocate for that and have that happen, I think will be really critical to really getting. I think it's critical from a human perspective and a community perspective, but also just from a how do you get the value from these resources and these tools and these innovations to progress the technology and society? We need to be investing in that, thinking of people as people with needs that need to be met. And it's a big restructure opportunity.
Well, and the age of abundance is a real thing. Like we really could hit this age where we have so much surplus, like ability to create things that we can really provide for everyone. Now, the question is if we get to that point, we have to get to the abundance point first, where we have plenty of resources before we start looking at these types of systems. I think there's this idea out there right now. People hear UBI and they hear UBN and they think, oh man, I don't have to work anymore. And they just kind of like tune out and like, say, yeah, they're gonna pay for me later, and I'm gonna have this universal basic income, and it's gonna be great. And people check out ahead of time. And I just want to caution people that this is probably gonna take a long time, and just don't count on it coming. Just you can advocate for it and you can push for it, but don't let it get you into this apathy of thinking, oh yeah, eventually I will have this. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible. So the thing that I want to point out here is that we can work less if we want to. So this is the long trend from 1870 down into 2017. So this is annual working. So 2,000 hours, that's 40 hours per week. And 1,000 hours, that's 20 hours per week with a 2-week vacation. So if you look at those markers and you see where we used to be in 1870, and you go forward into 1900, 1940, 1980, 19, and then into 2017, you can see that we've trended down from this 3,000 hours into 2,000 hours, and now we're sitting around that 1,500 mark. We're sitting between 1,500 and 2,000. Now, this trend line is pretty clear that it's trending down. So I think when you're looking out into the future for jobs and careers, maybe you do work less. Maybe you do work something closer to those 20 hours per week. And that doesn't mean you have to work less, but that means you have the option to work less. So I think it's very possible that we end up closer down to that 1,000-hour mark. So that 20 hours per week. Then I want to go through a couple job scenarios here. So these are a couple scenarios that I've seen that I think are interesting to just point out. So places where an expert becomes scalable, think of a doctor reaching more patients. Places where an expert becomes the creative, think of like a chef that then designs meals for a robotic kitchen. That chef was not I guess was kind of the creative, but becomes more creative, becomes more of the creative person in the room rather than just the conductor. Then you have the machine is not trusted. Would be roles where like a dental hygienist or like a hairstylist. I think those roles will be around for a very long time, just because we don't trust a machine to do that, to be in your mouth or have scissors near your head. I think it'll take some time before we get there. Then there's places where the machine is not ideal. I think the outdoor guide is a good example here, like a raft guide, or places where the human provides a better customer experience. Maybe a restaurant server, though that could be automated, but there's other versions of that where like the human provides a better customer experience that will probably keep the human around as a working person rather than automating fully. Then there's also split roles where you have the human plus the AI. I think of this from the coaching perspective. So if you go into sports, you could have a human coach and you could have an AI coach that work together. The AI coach being more of the statistical analysis, the human coach focusing more on the human element.
Yep, I think that's spot on.
I love this.
And so I think those could really work together to kind of form this whole system that we have. And that's not just for sports. The human plus AI thing, I think, could be different levels. You might have a human CEO and an AI CEO. You might have different human manager, AI manager. All of these different things, you might have that. A lot of them, you might have this human and AI role they're separate from each other, but complement each other.
I love this. And I think this also illustrates too some of the potential that job creation, like the top run, doctor reaches more patients. Now it's a doctor. And in
Yep.
that immediate scenario, in the future, it's a doctor, it's the person who has developed the system that's being used and manages the system and oversees it. And ultimately, ideally, are also now it's now able to do more and better, and maybe there's a more human connection, or it frees up the doctor for more bedside manner opportunities, things like that. And I love that.
Exactly. And one of the pieces here too to note is this intrusive text spectrum, which I think is a really good proxy. This is my own thing. This isn't something that someone put up on the internet, but the intrusive text spectrum is kind of one of my frames for understanding how fast a technology is likely to get adopted. And each person has kind of their own intrusivity tech spectrum. So these things might fall in different spots, but generally it's how much does this tech reach into your life, and actually does it make you feel uncomfortable? Is it too intrusive? So things like factory robotics, drone delivery, home robotics, and brain chips being all the way on this side, and then factory robotics being all the way on the other side. So then this is the 2040 jobs list. And I covered this last time in more detail, but this time I'll just kind of go through the quick high level moments here, which are things like the care economy, I think is going to be really big here. So you have elder care, healthcare, childcare. Those will be around because we want people to be there with their loved ones. And we want people to be able to be with people who are struggling through these things. If you're thinking elder care, a lot of people are going to want people around them for care. Then there's also child care, which is like the other side of that, where you probably don't want your kids to be raised by robots.
Mhm.
So freeing up a little more time where you can spend more time with your kids, freeing up time where more humans that are in the world can actually spend more time taking care of kids, helping with in the healthcare system, taking care of elderly people. There's a lot of components there that I think we kind of have these systems today, but those systems could be a lot better in the future with more people involved in those roles. Community, this is a huge one where like I don't really know my neighbor that well. Um, and my other neighbors, I think it would be really important to see in 20 well, it doesn't have to just be in 2040, but as we get more time for more people to work on more things, maybe we have more people who are actually focused on how do we make this community better? How do we create support groups? How do we plan events and really get people to know each other and talk with each other so that we're more connected as a community? So you could have like a community manager role, or you could have community event planners. You could have all these different pieces that are people facilitating things to get other people connected. Then the friend, this is one that, I use the word friend just because it's the easiest one to wrap our head around, but really people who are there for you for human support, advice, and connection. I think that might actually be a role that we value enough that we basically have some type of amount of money that we give people if you're actively helping other people and supporting other people, giving them advice. That's probably still going to be a thing, but that might also be something that we lean more into in the future. Art, human painting, drawing, community art classes, those are things that I think could really grow in the future. We imagine art a lot as, well, AI can generate all these different art pieces, but that doesn't mean that those art pieces have value. I think there's a lot of context behind art that is important to deriving the value of the art. For example, there's one art piece that's just a banana duct taped to a wall. Like that art piece, yes, anyone could make that, but like also the art piece had this context behind it that was able to actually give it the value that it has. So just because AI can make it doesn't mean it's not worth anything.
Yeah, I heard a good analogy for AI art where it's like, yes, it can create things, but it's not, you're not creating. It's like taking a photo of the Mona Lisa and saying you painted the Mona Lisa. Like, no, there's more to what art is.
Well, and the Mona Lisa is contextual, right? So the Mona Lisa is contextual back to that period in time, and its age has basically also been added to its context of this painting has survived this amount of time. And look how good the colors are and things like that for the time period. So there's this whole context behind that art piece that really gives it that value. I mean, even if you look at the things like in the NFT space, we already went through this. A lot of the NFTs that didn't have value didn't have art behind them. They didn't have art context behind them. Like the Beeple work of art that basically sold for the Beeple NFT that sold for a ton of money, that that represented 5,000 days of him doing a daily digital art piece, and then he shrunk them down into these little images, and that's the NFT that was sold. So that NFT had all this context behind it that represented a lot more value than, like, yes, you could have just copy and pasted, like you could have just screenshotted that image and just said, look, I have this Beeple incredible NFT art, but like it's the context behind it that really matters. So then we've got entertainment. I think there's still going to be all the recorded media stuff, and that stuff probably gets easier to distribute. But there's also probably live music, live speakers, and live comedy. Those things are still going to be around because we're still going to want to see humans pushing that bounds of their ability to kind of present these things. It's not like we're not going to have people go live or have a live concert or anything like that.
I think it goes back to that AI or ChatGPT can tell you nice things, and eventually you realize it's a robot talking to you. Like that's never really going to be. I think there's things you can add value in, but there's also still always going to be that value in a real person's creativity and connection.
And then travel, people are still going to want to travel. They're going to go to new countries. There might be space experiences too. There might be new other experiences that we can unlock, but people are probably going to want to go see all those new experiences still. Travel industry is still going to be a thing. The adventure industry is still going to be a thing. Extreme sports, exploring dangerous locations, VR experiences, I think is an interesting one where you could see maybe a tour guide goes into a dangerous location and they record it in a way that they can share it with people, or you can actually go join that person live and experience the thing that they're experiencing, but from the comfort of your own home. So you could go to these dangerous locations, but you could do them safely. So I think there's a lot of interesting things there in the adventure area. Sports are still going to be around. We're going to want to see what we can do, what the bounds of human ability are. There will be human coaching too. Like I said, with the human plus the AI coach, there's the human element of coaching. There's the athlete in that loop. And then there's robo sports too. I mean, you already see this with drone racing, with F1, with all these other things that are effectively the human is racing plus the technology. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And it's not something that's just going to disappear. And there will be people who, that's how they make that's how they make their career. And it's kind of, there's this concept, we use the phrase like, that's how I earn a living. I kind of wonder if that's something that we won't use anymore, because it's not how you earn a living. It's just how you earn what you want to buy what you want. You know, you do things so that maybe you can travel more, but you don't, it's not the things that you do so you can just get food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
We have all these kind of little isms that we say where we're talking about things like how you make enough money to survive. But I think that's not necessarily going to be as much of the case in the age of abundance. It's more going to be, how do you want to spend your time? And then how do you earn to basically be able to do new things? Then getting a little bit deeper, there's maintenance, robotic maintenance, problem solving, and system checks. Then there's the tech specialist. These are new systems, better robots, new technology, research, scientific advancement, experiment planning, results evaluation. learning. This is the whole child development side of things, purpose finding, and lifelong learning. We talked about that in depth in the last one, but there's some interesting stuff there. The entrepreneur, new businesses, business growth, business buying. The innovator, business growth, new tech applications, product improvements. The investor is interesting because it's trend research, capital allocation, and then AI trade evaluation, but it's probably not short term. It's very much the long term side of things, kind of looking at all the different research that's out there and making a final decision, because I don't think the AI is going to be the only one doing that. And then leaders, I think we're still going to have leaders, team motivation, team alignment, and then AI decision analysis, being able to go through those things and say what actually matters here. And then the big broad theme of this whole thing is that you have humans doing human jobs and robots doing robot jobs. And so the big theme areas, you've got care, community, ability, learning, and progress.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. So we covered all the things with the future-proofing your career. So now this is going to be all about just the career tactics as we break down a couple of the career tactics for you to use. And like I said, we pick 3 of these each time, and then we break them down. So if you have career tactics that you would like us to break down on this show, just let us know, and we will try to incorporate them in the next one. So for today's career tactics, we've got marketing yourself, posting content to get a job, leveraging your network, who do you know, and then job searching in times of uncertainty.
That sounds great topics here today, Alec.
All right. Anything you want to add before we jump into them?
I think that this sounds like a very good agenda. One thing that I like to expand on in regards to marketing yourself, there's a number of different ways, but the one key is to be consistent and to start establishing yourself as maybe you're a subject matter expert, or maybe there's a certain area that you want to post as it pertains to a specific job you're after. So I think that's really important.
Agreed. So when it comes to marketing yourself, Scott likes to use the word subject matter expert. Scott, do you want to just kind of give us an overview of what that subject matter expert means and how someone can go about achieving that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's just say that you are, an example would be if you're a marketing specialist and you have a specific area of marketing, that let's say you're an expert in social media, or you're an expert in, I'm going to go back to old school, into printing, or in the sense that if you are a subject matter expert and it's about brand. And so therefore you want to write content, you want to respond and post and repost content that continually make the impression to the people that you're connected with, and that's where we'll go to the network next, but that they're seeing that you are projecting yourself as an expert in this space, or at least a resource for that space. And so the subject matter expert is a critical resource that people would want to look towards to help them answer questions, to do projects, or to be part of their team. The other part that I think you mentioned here is also, it illustrates your interest. It's a proof of your interest. It's an area that draws me to you. If I look at Alec Kaufman in Annovation, right, and I look at the, helping entrepreneurs leverage innovation to grow their businesses, anything around that for me is you. And I think that establishing yourself and proving yourself so people don't have a doubt of what your interest is, and that you also have established a clear goal. What is the facts that you are going to bring to the table? What are you going to deliver for the employer in this case?
Yeah, and I think, those two things, the subject matter expert and the proof of interest, go hand in hand, because effectively what you're doing when you're creating that is, if you are an expert, you can go into that subject matter expert area. If you aren't an expert, you can still at least prove interest. And so both of these things work hand in hand to prove that this is the direction you want to go in, and they work at any level. Subject matter expert, maybe you're working toward that. Proof of interest, you can put that at any level though. You can basically from the ground up say, "Hey, this is me. I want to do this." And you get really clear about that goal, kind of tying back into what we were talking about last month with getting clear on your personal elevator pitch, where you're clarifying exactly what you want to do, but you're doing that through social media, you're doing that online so that everyone can see this is what this person's goal is, and then they can help you achieve it.
Well, ultimately, when you're marketing yourself, you're expressing your professional brand and what value it has.
Yeah. Well, and I think brand is one of those words that people get confused a lot with, but think of it as kind of like your reputation and your trust that you are going to do the thing that they expect you to do. So like if you're building the brand that sounds like you're interested in marketing, then they can expect that if they give you a marketing role, that's aligned with what you're interested in. So like for me, my personal brand around innovation, entrepreneurship, and tech, people can expect that I'm probably going to be talking about that. So it gives you a clear setting for what to expect about someone, and then it also is your reputation of that. So when we're talking about your personal brand, it's your personal reputation and what you're known for.
Perfect.
So anything on the tactics of posting content? So like LinkedIn's obviously great. What should someone be doing there?
Well, that's a great point. If you are on multiple professional socials, you can repost, or you can even have some of your posting that does go from one platform to the other. One thing that I find that if you have some ideas, jot them down. I have a file that I keep that all it says is content on it. And it's content for whether it be an article, a post that I'm going to do in the future, or it's something that I've seen that someone else does that I think I might want to expand on. I do find that particularly if you're not doing what I call native, authentic posting, and you consider yourself a subject matter expert, you better start doing it. When you're trying to prove your interest, I believe that you should be commenting on everything that is around what your interest is. And the progression from there is then you will start ultimately producing your own content rather than commenting on others.
Well, and commenting kind of has this nice cross-pollination effect of where you're getting yourself in front of different audiences. Whereas if you're posting yourself, you're sending it out to your audience, and depending on the size of your audience, that may or may not work.
That's true. That's one of the reasons why I emphasize if you are going to be, whether you're just marketing yourself or you're in the midst of a job search, that you have a very deep, qualified network, specifically on LinkedIn. If you only have 250 contacts, the breadth of your messaging is going to be very limited.
Yeah, and I think you could do a good move here too, even if you're just starting out, which is take people on the journey of learning too. If you're learning about a field, you could even do this while you're in college. Say you're a college marketing major or any other major. Just walk them through what you're learning, talk about it, and actually prove that you're interested in this subject. And if you kind of get in all these different circles of people who are you can comment on the posts of other subject matter experts, but you get into these circles on LinkedIn of people who are in that field or any other social media platform that you might be using, then you're in that ecosystem and you're starting to understand what the real world of that thing looks like. So it gets you well set up for when you do start to actually lean more into that subject matter expertise, or you do end up becoming that professional in that field. It's one, setting you up for that, and it's two, really sharing what you're learning so that people understand what is the curriculum for this subject. Because I guarantee you the person who's the expert in the professional side of the field probably haven't they're not recalling back to all their college stuff. And it actually might, even if they are, it might be a fun little walk down memory lane to remember, oh yeah, I remember when I was learning about that. But these courses change a lot too. So there's always new stuff that people might be
Well, I think the
missing.
comment you just made there about there's always new stuff, we've got to take it beyond your proof of interest just being through social. You've got to get out there and join some of those communities virtually and in person, whether it be these business networking groups that we have or these online communities, that you prioritize that interaction, because it's just as important that you listen and learn from the other people out there than just trying to project yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that ties really nicely into the next subject. And just before we get to that, an action, if you want to think about marketing yourself, is what is something that you could possibly post about today that gets you closer to your goal? So, whatever your goal is, what's something that you could post today that gets you in the right direction there? And then, if that ends up working or you think that that's a good move, you can just repeat that process and you could ask yourself that question once a week or even every day and make content about that. So, on to leveraging your network. So, this is who do you know? And we've kind of touched on some of the points in this, but where should someone start if they're like, I just started a LinkedIn profile. Where do I even go from here?
Yeah, I find that right now in if you're in the job market, I find LinkedIn and Instagram, both of them, to be very helpful, particularly if you're trying to create your own brand. But ultimately, how do you leverage your network? First of all, you've got to build it, right? And you build your network, as we just stated earlier, through expanding your connections in a meaningful way. And we also talked a little bit about how you get involved in these communities, whether they're online or in person. And that's also how you really get to know people. And the people you know and shake hands with and have conversations with, let's connect with them. Connect with them that next step. Put them as part of your network. And I find that will help tremendously, because when you meet them, they understood what your elevator pitch was, and you might have even had a further discussion about what you're up to, what you're looking for, and what kind of people you want to be surrounded with. But then when they connect with you, they have that on top of mind, and they may introduce you to someone else that you never, ever would have had an opportunity to meet. And I think some people might find it humbling, but I think it's really great if you can have an open dialogue with your network. If something's happening in your life that you need some help with and you need to know how to navigate it. I had somebody the other day said, "Hey, I'm trying to attend this conference in Anaheim, California. And does anyone know of any more reasonable hotels than what I have found?" Okay. And in this particular case, they did find them one. And then they started to say, well, yeah, I'm going to be staying there too. Or in other cases, yeah, I'm going to be there as well. If you don't mind, we can share a hotel. So these people are solving problems as small as they can be. But guess what? How tight is that relationship going to be after the conference?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
The other thing, and what that does, is we talked earlier today about taking a problem and making it an opportunity. And in this particular case, if you look at your network and you can identify a problem that someone else can benefit from, that becomes an opportunity for someone in your network. And I find if you're known for the person that brings people opportunities versus the person that always has problems, you will gain respect significantly faster.
Absolutely. Well, and to add to that, too, it's like I remember a while ago when I was like, I need more rock climbing friends. And what's a great way to get more friends who are into rock climbing? You go to the rock climbing gym
Yep.
over and over and over again. And if you show up there regularly, there are probably other people you will meet who show up there regularly. And you can make friends that way. So it all ties really well into how to actually make friends with anything is go somewhere, show up there regularly, and friends become parts of your network, become opportunities as well.
I have a story about, if you have an open mind and a positive mindset, and you've got to do a 3-hour plane ride, you'll meet people on the airplane that so many times you'll have some like-minded person sitting either next to you or across the aisle, and you'll strike a conversation, and you'll land. And if you follow up on these people, you'd be surprised what it can bring you in the future, whether it's a new
Absolutely.
business opportunity or they become an asset in your network. And so those kind of actions, or those openness, being open, is very important, I believe. But your ability to communicate with your network, whether it be through texting, email, chat, or a phone call, if you let them know why, what's your objective, you'd be surprised how productive some of these interactions can be. And one other thing, let me note, to help accelerate the buildup of your network, if you have an informational conversation, or as many call it, informational interview with someone from company X, and you finish your call, and right at close of your call, you say, "Hey, do you know of anyone else that might to be able to connect me with?" That's kind of, look at your illustration on our slide right here. You're touching one spot, but then there's 3 other heads popping up, right? So you're always asking for just one more. And if you have a widget and you're looking for someone to be interested in it, you say, "Do you know of anyone else that might need this?" Or be humble. "Do you know anyone else that might be able to help me?"
Yeah, it's like you're building onto that. You're attaching a note. Like there's a reason why LinkedIn has first connections, second connections, third connections. And those second connections are more valuable than you think they are. Because if you have a first connection with someone and then you have a second connection and you notice that second connection is someone you want to get connected with, ask that person if they can intro you, or just say, "Hey, I noticed that you know this person. How do you know them?" You can do those types of things, and it gives you an in that's very effective for starting the conversation. And I think a lot of people go into these with like a sales mentality or like a very transactional mentality, but just be personable, be friendly, and just be open to having a good conversation. I
I
think those are
agree.
the key points. If you lead with that, you'll probably find a lot more traction. Another thing to add here is your phone contacts, because a lot of people have contacts in their phone and they don't even think of them as people in their network. So when you think of your network, think about who you're connected with on LinkedIn. Think about who you've got on Facebook, other social media platforms. Then think about your phone contacts. Who's in your phone that you haven't connected with in a while? If you start going through all of these things, you have a pretty substantial list of people that you could talk to who are probably pretty aligned with helping you out with something. So if you or at least if you can clearly articulate your goal to them, they will probably be able to point you in the right direction.
I think that's a critical point that you just made.
So before we move on to the next one, which I think we're ready to do, right, Scott?
I'm ready to move on.
All right. The action that I think would be good here is, who do you know that probably knows someone you'd like to know? And it's just a great open-ended question to just think on and always be thinking on, because your network's going to change over time, and who you might want to know is also going to change over time. But thinking, who can I go back to? Who can I connect with? Who should I be connecting with? Super important.
I have to agree. I actually have a meeting later this afternoon with the Vice President of Human Resources of Lewis and Clark College. And I've never met her before. And I was interested in an initiative that they're doing. And I saw that she was connected to one of my close contacts. So I reached out to them, and they happened to be even on vacation in Arizona. But she sent email to both of us making the introduction on Friday, and we're seeing each other today.
Perfect. It's things like that. It's just networking. is just kind of this incredible force of just it's human connection. We call it networking, and some people get scared by the term networking. It's
It's
human connection.
connecting.
Yep.
Connecting is a less threatening, I guess.
But I will add, if you ever need an expert connector, this guy Scott here is the one of the best connectors that I know.
Thank you, Alec. I take a lot of pride in knowing a lot of people that can add value to other people.
So he's one of the people that I think of all the time from whenever I run across anyone who's basically I don't know what or like they kind of have an idea of what they want to do, especially if they're thinking about career stuff. That's what makes Scott so good with career coaching is that he knows how to connect you up with who you probably need to know and he knows how to draw that out of you.
Thanks. All right. Go on to the next one, I guess.
So this is job searching in times of uncertainty. I'm going to let you lead on this one.
Oh yeah, I love this topic because right now, we try to avoid talking on these type of things about politics and economics and religion and things like that. But in certain cases, when change is coming upon us so fast and it might even happen one day and change the next day, it creates this uncertainty. And the uncertainty for depending on who that company is, depending on who that leader is, can create doubt, can create hesitation. You have the plan, and I love that. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I have a client right now who is in the pipeline of an interview process and doing very well. And I'm very confident that their experience and skills are the best fit. But they had an interview and they followed up with a thank you and asked the timeline on the next step. And they pushed it all the way out to mid-May. And, I don't think it's because the decision maker's on vacation. I don't think that it's even that they don't have the money. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty that people have to process to get their confidence back. And I think that job searching in times of uncertainty is tough because you have to be patient and you can't point a finger at yourself, particularly when it's things out of your control. All right. So I'm going to use an example. Let's say you're interviewing for a product design position with Nike right now. The opening's out there and you're interviewing for that job and they're dragging their feet. They're dragging their feet because they don't fully know what the tariffs are going to do to their business. And if you take a look at their stock price, they don't that the market doesn't know either. If 94% of all footwear comes from Asia, what are they supposed to do in regards to watching their spend? And their number one spend is human assets. And human assets are employees. And even though they have an opening, they might put a freeze on hiring. And that is something that I believe every job seeker during the time of uncertainty needs to do. They need to find out, look at press releases, dive a little deeper on the web and find out if a company is in a hiring freeze. That can really reduce your frustration if you find out that's the case. Because in many cases, HR recruiters and hiring managers unfortunately don't tell you. So the employer, I think during uncertainty, what would really be refreshing to me is if employers would be honest with job seekers, whether it be publishing the wage, the salary, right? Or setting expectations on when this position is going to fill. I have another client that they just reposted a job and way down on the bottom, it finally said a start date. You'd hardly see start dates published. And I thought that's nice and transparent because the start date's not until June 1st. And if you're unemployed, you want that job to start May 1st, right? If you are employed and they make the offer, that might be more palatable. But you have to assess where you are and what your needs are. And I think if employers can be more transparent by sharing compensation ranges and sharing, in this case, I thought it was pretty great that they've put a start date out there. That allows applicants to make more educated decisions, you know? And so I think that's really important for employees to be more transparent and for applicants to also ask the right questions without being perceived as demanding or desperate, right? You can ask it in a way, you know, if you could, when would you like this person to start, right? You know, and do you have a range of what that compensation might look like in ways that are not threatening, in ways that demonstrate curiosity rather than you're being commanding?
Well, and in addition to that, I think understanding the perspective that the business is in and starting to have kind of that open communication lines, I think is the really key part on the business side and on the applicant side is just how can you make sure that it's open, honest communication? And I think that might be one of the big advantages that smaller businesses have is they're actually able to be more honest and they're actually able to have that dialogue. Whereas a large business with a ton of applicants might not be able to do that same open, honest dialogue. Do you think that's
Yeah, and there might be
accurate
some
or?
regulatory compliance also in what you can and cannot say. The other thing that I want job seekers to be aware of that you'd be surprised how many times there are jobs posted and you're interviewing for it, and you're such an asset that they hire you for a job that isn't even there today. That's it. You know, I was planning next quarter to hire for that position, but you seem to be the right fit. Would you be interested in this role? And I find that surprisingly to be more common than you might think.
Well, it's like especially when they're looking for good people, if they find good people, even if it's not quite the right role that they applied for initially, like if you find a good person and you're that employer, try to get the good person in the door. Because if you want good people on your team, you're trying to build your A team. So when you find one, ideally don't let them go.
Yeah, human assets are hard to come by, especially if somebody that wants to come work for you.
Yeah, if they're motivated to work for you and yeah, motivated, aligned, things like that, that's huge.
Well, for the sake of time, let's continue.
This is actually the last one, so we could spend as much on it as you want.
Well, you know, I'd like to have some open dialogue as others look and see this in regards to, I would love to see what the audience, what kind of feedback do they have, what the experiences they might have. And, you know, you might have your mindset on doing X, Y, and Z, but there's other opportunities within that organization that you're qualified for. As we continue to get more and more experience and skills, we have a broader band of competency, and that creates more opportunity as you can do that. But if we have a little more time, I'll make another comment in regards to what job seekers should do during times of uncertainty. We talked before about freelancing, but the other area that I'd like to emphasize also is continued learning. And the fact that there's so many great certification programs out there today that you can improve your competency, your knowledge, and build your resume by adding those type of things. I had somebody the other day who I knew they were qualified. They had their MBA, but it was their certification in business analytics that differentiated them. A cert in business analytics differentiated them for the job, and not their MBA by itself. And so I thought, wow, what if he had not done that, if he did not have a desire and was not drawn to analytics, he wouldn't have differentiated himself from the other candidates. He would be just like the others. And they may not have found their treasured employee. But they did. So that's the other thing. Differentiate yourself in times of uncertainty. Think about your continual learning. Ask good questions and listen for all those signs. And ultimately, this type of interaction will help you identify opportunities. I think the hardest thing in job searching, to be honest, whether it's times of uncertainty or a traditional, a stable economy, is being patient and maintaining confidence. That is the hardest thing to do, because if you don't learn from different opportunities and you view them all as failures, your confidence level will drop. And when you go in for that next interview, they can smell it.
Mhm. Have you heard of what was it called? It's kind of like failure inertia. It's
Yep.
basically it's this cycle where you have one failure and then you let that failure drag you down
Yep.
and you lose that momentum, and so then you roll into another failure and that failure just makes you feel worse, and so you just kind of get this cycle of continuous failure. And I think it's not necessarily failure. Failure is maybe not the right word there, but that could be the same thing with rejection,
Yes.
or you're just not seeing the success you want, so it's degrading your confidence. Your confidence just goes lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And so the way to actually get out of that cycle is you have to break the cycle. You have to start thinking of it, either you reframe it and you realize that those aren't the failures that you're considering them to be, or you find those small wins that you can do that start to build that momentum back up in the other direction.
Absolutely. And the opposite side of that, if you can, is when you are, when I worked for Procter and Gamble, and if you're having success on a given day as a salesperson and you're knocking it out of the park, everyone you're calling on saying yes, they want what you have, you're solving their problems. People get all excited, feel good, and the ones that go golfing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's short lived. The salesperson that keeps selling till 7 at night because they're on a run and they feel high about it, that's the person that's going to stay on track and be a winner.
Yeah, because that same momentum that works to bring you down also works to build you up. And so you can have winning momentum as well. And you can ride that as far as you possibly can go, but you have to get the ball rolling in the direction that you want it to go.
Okay. I think that's right. But it all comes down to that positive attitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either way, stay positive, optimistic, and it'll come. You just have to stay on it because you know what you have is a value.
And I want to string a couple things together real quick here, which is we talked about a bunch of different topics, but they're all really related. So, like, if you're out of a job and you're sitting there and you don't know what to do with your time, you can be on doing some type of retraining, certification, or some type of learning. You can
Yep.
be going out there and you can be networking, and you can be tapping into your network by kind of using who you know, connecting with who you know. And then you can also be self-marketing too, posting that content and kind of getting yourself out there, building that personal brand, and getting really clear about exactly what you want to do and telling everyone you can about it.
I have to agree. I think there's some great closing points.
Absolutely. Last thing on the action that you could do here if you're job searching in uncertain times or you're worried about uncertain times, what are the other opportunities that you are qualified for? A lot of people just sit in the job that they're in thinking there is no way this is ever going to change. And, you know, you can be searching at any point. You can have a job and you can be searching.
Yes.
It is good. It is a good idea to at least know the opportunities out there, because you can have that kind of backup plan, that idea that, okay, if I lost my job, these are the opportunities that I could go after that I might be interested in for my next role. You don't have to apply for them. You don't have to start doing all everything to get that job, but you should at least kind of know what's out there that you might do for your next move.
And be ready. have an updated resume, stay in contact with your network on LinkedIn. Don't just react to all of a sudden you jump on LinkedIn and update your resume because you lost your job yesterday. That kind of knee jerk can be seen all over the place too. Gosh, I haven't talked to this guy in 3 years. What's he doing reaching out now? Right. And so the reality is you need to maintain and nurture the people that you add value to and the people that can add value to you.
I think that's one other piece here. Adding value, giving value to others so that if you need value at some point, you can ask them for that in a reasonable fashion.
Absolutely. It's easier for someone to give when they've been given to.
Absolutely. All right. So that wraps up this Future of Jobs and Careers, the second in our Future of Jobs and Careers series. This happens every month. It is the third Wednesday of every month at 7:30 in the morning. Our next one is May 21st, 2025. And you can continue the conversation in the Annovation community. Again, we have our Future Talk every Friday at 7:30 in the morning in the Annovation community. And send us your questions. We'd love to hear from you. Topics, feedback, all of that. It's all great. All helps us improve this thing and make it better and better so we can reach more people.
Have a great rest of the week.
You as well. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.